Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. It is 10:03, and we will be getting started at promptly at 10:05 just to make space and space for anyone that may be running just a few minutes behind. We thank for you all that are already here with us for being with us, and we're gonna be moving right along in just a second. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started so we can be good. Um, Good with our time and making sure that we cover this in a timely fashion. So, my name is Onoyemi Williams. I'm the Deputy Director of Faith in Action Alabama, and I am also a fellow of the Black Southern Women's Collaborative and the extension team that who participated in the listening session and community that resulted in from the ground up understanding voting challenges and community concerns, which was in our data was populated by Renata Robinson of a Robinson research and consulting firm. So just a little bit about how we got here. um, we felt it was so important that we talk to people in community about what it was that socially engaged them in the political process and what was on their hearts. We understand that African Americans are the least likely to be invited to participate in a survey. And in addition to that, we're also least likely to own the information or the data associated with a survey being launched into our communities. And we wanted to change that dynamic. We understand many people do not listen to intensely what is being said at the kitchen table of the African American family as it exists in the state of Alabama. And we wanted to give voice to those conversations in a way that could help further improve how we are being treated in this state and how we're showing up when it comes to social engagement in the community. We did a survey that was in face, it was person to person throughout the state of Alabama. And we used our relationships. This was relationship organizing. We used our relationships with our faith communities, our HBCUs, our D9s, and families and friends in order to collect the information and to be able to understand what is important to the people of our community. There were 14 virtual focus groups, participants from across the state. These were individuals that were selected to participate in a listening session around how they felt, either being in the field collecting these surveys or being a participant that took the survey in the community. The new congressional map of District 2024 um, is for is going to be on the ballot this year, and it's significant in the fact that it will be an opportunity for us to have not just District 7 representation, but the opportunity to have an additional Black majority district in District 2. And we wanted to hear from the people of the community. And so, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Renata.
Good morning. My name is Renata Robinson. I'm the owner of Robinson Research and Consulting. I'm also the research director in New Georgia Project, a 501c3 voter education and engagement organization that works across the state of Georgia. In this role, I oversee research that informs our organizational strategy, and it focuses primarily on Black voters, which makes us kind of unique. We also focus on what we call high opportunity voters, which are voters who are often discounted and overlooked because of various factors, including the infrequency in which they vote and their cynicism, which is usually justified. I am a proud graduate of a private HBCU right outside of my hometown of Jackson, Mississippi, called Tulu College, and I hold 2 Master of Science degrees from Georgia State University. One is in risk management and insurance, and the other is in urban policy studies with concentrations in policy analysis and economic development. So all that to say, when Phyllis Hill of Black Southern Women's Collaborative contacted me to compile the data that this group of fellows collected, I was super excited to dig in. That they were able to engage nearly 1,900 Black Alabama residents across the state and beyond is a learning in itself. The secret sauce of this project was that these organizers took to the community to show genuine interest, to exercise patience in explaining what this was for and why it was worth people's time to participate, and help them in completing the surveys. So after this, they will be engaged again to validate them and to let them know that they actually do have power in their collective voices by sharing the findings with them. So many times the narrative we hear in the media and the public square is one of dismissiveness. We continuously say that Black people, Black voters are not a monolith, but mainstream research does not always reflect that. We are many times relegated to a handful of folks within the survey sample size, and then the findings are limited to those that support a narrative that Black voters are not worth the investment of engaging in a genuine way beyond traditional transactional engagement. And that's, receiving mailers right before an election and that sort of thing. The research that I've led in Georgia has shown time and again that those tactics are not effective. Black voters need consistent interest and conversation and seeing the proof in the pudding to build long-term power systems. Black voters feel powerful when they see investment in our communities, when we are connected to the resources that we've identified are needed, when we are heard. And that is why this project is so special. So to build on the survey that this team developed, as Onoyemi already shared, we conducted focus groups to provide some additional context throughout the report. It's so important to note that many of the people who completed this survey and who participated in these focus groups have never been asked to do so before. So I cannot emphasize more the need to first commit to engaging undercounted and underrepresented populations in order to really understand their needs and to help them pursue the dreams that they have about their own futures and the futures of the communities in which they live. And so before I turn it over to the next person, there are 3 findings that I want to uplift before we get into some details. So number 1, Onoyemi has already said, there's a new congressional district in Alabama that could very well be leveraged as a tool to amplify Black community needs. But we found that roughly 40% of the survey respondents were not aware of this new district. And that is a clear indication that more education was and is needed throughout the process of both securing the congressional district and in terms of mobilizing that district to vote. Number 2, voting is not the only show of power that there is. Building true power starts with voting, but it builds onto that in other ways. And one of the things that we explored in this report was jury duty service. 30% of respondents across the state of Alabama have never received a jury duty summons. 30%. Another 30% have not received a summons in over 10 years. Then we found in focus groups that those who had received a summons within the last decade weren't necessarily aware of how important that service is, or the link between serving and being a registered voter. We also heard that even when participants did serve jury duty, it was not necessarily a pleasant experience because they found themselves in the minority, having to determine if they were willing to speak up in a group where everyone else seemed to be biased, regardless of the evidence that was being presented. Finally, the number 3 thing that I wanted to uplift is that Black people know what issues impact them, and we should believe them. And we should be curious about their experiences so that we can co-conspire to develop solutions. So in this survey, respondents identified housing, reproductive health care, and community safety as their top 3 issues of concern, and national and state data back them up. And you can look at several sources to see the severity of these issues in the state of Alabama. And so I hope that you all will find value in this report, beyond just the findings, but again, also in the methodology in how these respondents were engaged very, very intentionally. And so now I will turn it over to Dr. Adia Winfrey, who will talk more about the 2nd Congressional District.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Adia Winfrey, co-founder and executive director of Transform Alabama, a 501c3 using hip-hop-based strategies to increase voter engagement among Black Alabamians. As a 2020 congressional nominee in Alabama's 3rd district, I saw how congressional lines were reducing the voting power of Black Alabamians in East Alabama and parts of the Black Belt. From the time the Milligan versus Merrill lawsuit was filed in November 2021 until the Supreme Court ruling June 8, 2023, Transform Alabama worked closely with Alabama Forward, educating Alabamians about redistricting in the case. The Black Southern Women's Collaborative, understanding the power of this new congressional district, asked respondents if they were aware of it. As Renata mentioned, 3 of 5 people surveyed reported that they were aware of the new district, with half hearing about it through news media and about 22% through word of mouth. And while this was encouraging, focus group participants that lived in the 2nd Congressional District were unaware they lived there. This highlights the importance and the necessity of engaged leaders, information, and community involvement. Alabama's 21st century redistricting fight has become a hope-building catalyst for many Black Alabamians and people around the country, including Louisiana. It reminds us that representation matters and is a wake-up call that it is time to reimagine what our futures can look like. In 1964, Amelia Boynton Robinson was the first Black woman to run for Congress in Alabama. She had been a voting rights organizer in Selma for 4 decades prior to the 1965 march from Selma to Montgomery. And one of her most famous quotes is, "Get off of my shoulders. The foundation has been laid. Now it's time for you to build on it and get to work." It is time for all those who believe in democracy, particularly Black Alabamians, to recognize that we're the change that we've been waiting for. Through this survey, through this report, through the voices that we heard throughout the state of Alabama, it is clear that Black Alabamians are ready to reimagine what our futures can look like. And again, it is time to get to work. And I will now turn it over to Tiembe Barnes.
Thank you, Dr. Adia. My name is Tiambe Barnes. I am the program coordinator for Southern Partners Fund, an Atlanta-based foundation. I am also a lifelong member of the AME Church and a proud graduate of Alabama State University. I reside in a small town where only 19% of the people look like me. Participating and helping to curate this project was very important to engage HBCUs and Black churches and participate in neighborhood gatherings. They were necessary because these entities have been the anchor for Black people, Black voters, and a space for safe information, and also to question and understand what is happening. These organizations have been vital to Black people's well-being and their upward mobility. And just like the Black voters' voices, these institutions have often been shunned and overlooked. And as we can see in our survey, people said what they needed. The survey revealed that people were looking for engaged leaders. They needed people to hear them, to know that their voice matters and that they too are people who vote. If we look at the next slide, it also talks about the next slide talks about how they are engaged and they do know things, but often they are overlooked. And so as we know, this process has shown us, and throughout my life, from being a part of a Black church and an HBCU, this is a place of trusted information, especially in small town, rural areas, because there are not always many faces that look like them. And organizations need to hear from Black voters and know that they're just not someone that show up right before election day, but they need to be talked to and vetted and be engaged before then, because they too, their voices matter, and they are in community, have been there, and will be there throughout the duration. And I will pass it on to Cameron.
Hey, well, Tanisha. Hi, well, yeah, well, good morning, everyone, and just, thank you all for being here today, for this release of this community listening report. I am honored to speak about the importance of this report, particularly because of the work that I do. I currently serve as the executive director for Alabama Values, which is a grassroots communications organization that leverages narrative and messaging strategies to increase civic engagement and build ideological power in underserved and underrepresented communities in Alabama and across the South. So I want to kick off by just saying that that I see this report is more than just a collection of data. Is I see it as a resource that can be used to really drive narrative and policy shifts towards increasing voting power among some of the state's most underserved communities. The impact of unfair maps and the lack of adequate representation for underserved and underrepresented communities, particularly Black communities, cannot be overstated. During the recent this past redistricting cycle, we witnessed firsthand how gerrymandered districts exacerbate the marginalization of these communities. These unfair maps perpetuate systemic inequalities and they really hinder progress towards racial equity and true democracy reform in our state. I mean, in a state where more than 714,000 Alabamians, including 222,000 children, live below the federal poverty line, which, is $26,496 for a family of four, in a state where Black people make up a quarter of the state's population, but represent a quarter of, the people under the poverty line, where access to healthcare can often be seen as a luxury for many, where educational opportunities are unevenly distributed, where voting rights are constantly under threat. The need for investments and actions such as this report has never been greater. And, and I just want to say that organizations like those represented on this call today, organizations who are prioritizing building relationships and collaborating with community leaders and individuals who are directly impacted by systemic injustices. And, these organizations are critical to achieving the change that we want to see in our state. However, it's not enough to just, gather data and publish reports. And I think these organizations, they know that, they walk the walk. We need intentional year-round engagement in our underserved and underrepresented communities. I often say that those closest to the pain are closest to the solution. These communities are often who are directly impacted by these unfair policies and practices, yet their voices are rarely centered in the solution-oriented and strategic conversations. Too often these communities fall victim to what I call drive-by, get out the vote activities, where they are only engaged right before major elections. And this approach leads to frustration and fatigue, yet these communities remain hopeful and resilient. You know, um, they are, tired of being silenced. They want to be heard, and they want to be part of the solution. And I think this report really highlights the intersectional conversations about civic life and issues, and aspirations that often goes undocumented and overlooked. Too often narratives surrounding Black voters are mirrored in the struggle or misframing, just really failing to capture our forward-looking perspectives and our lived experiences, particularly in this country. And this report changes that by really highlighting the stories and some of the proposed solutions, and presenting them in a way that can drive meaningful change. And so I also want to point out that events like this is crucial because, they share this vital information with the media. And, in today's polarized and politicized media landscape, it is essential for the media to take this opportunity to amplify the voices of those that are often silenced in the political process. I mean, historically, the media has played a role in either amplifying or delegitimizing movements for freedom and democracy, movements that push against the status quo of society. So, in conclusion, I just want to say that From the Ground Up isn't just a report. It is a call to action. It challenges us to engage with Black communities genuinely, to craft narratives that reflect our realities and aspirations, and to push for policies that promote equitable and restorative justice. And so I want to say, thank you to all the partners and participants who made this project possible. And I look forward to what comes after this. And at this time, I will turn it over to Cameron Thigpen.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Cameron Thigpen, and I am the creator of Hipped Interest, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that advocates for social justice education through media content and community programs. I received my bachelor's degree from the University of Alabama in Birmingham in political science with a double major in African American Studies and Human Rights, and I have a master's degree in public administration with a concentration of nonprofit management. So I wanted to discuss our recommendations after finding this report. So as social justice organizers, it is important to provide recommendations on how to push this project forward. It is imperative to offer realistic and sustainable recommendations that can serve as kind of stepping stones for continuous change in Alabama. So we have 6 recommendations, but I wanted to discuss 2. One suggestion that we have is that these findings should serve as kind of a wake-up call, for Alabama elected officials and for philanthropic organizations on the power of these communities, that they are informed, empowered, and organized. So we want this report to let our officials know in the state of Alabama that Black Alabamians in these communities are informed, are empowered, and do know how to organize their voices. We hope that this data informs all of our elected officials from state and local that Black Alabamians have concerns that needs to be addressed. And hopefully these concerns are heard, are listened to, and are taken seriously. And we just have to continue to hope that every single day that these elected officials that we elect are working every day to better their lives, and also to be held accountable if they don't work to better their lives around these issues. Another recommendation that I wanted to discuss this morning is that every movement and liberation space should centralize and uplift cross-generational conversations. These conversations stretch across from young people, children, older generations, and even our elders. During this project, we were able to communicate the importance of using our voices to advocate for our concerns throughout throughout every place and throughout every focus group. So we feel that it's very important to have these cross-generational conversations. As a young person, the benefit of these encounters is imperative and paramount to addressing our collective challenges that we face together, and advocate for our intersectional liberation and expressing our collective joy and love. So we hope that these recommendations, once again, will serve as the next steps for creating actual change in the state of Alabama. Thank you all for listening to us today, and I will pass it back to Anayemi for questions.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, ladies, for all your comments and your voices in this process. And so we will open it up to see if anyone has any questions about the From the Ground Up project. And you can come off mute and use your voice commands. Go ahead.
Hi,
Harris.
this was great information, and I'm so glad that I was able to join. I am Director of Racial Justice at Sojourners, we are actually looking to do some work in Alabama to support whatever it is for voter protection and engagement. But my question is, how much was the Black church involved in this? Did you engage clergy and lay leaders in the gathering of this information? I'm just wondering, how involved was the church?
Tiambe, would you like to respond to that question?
Could you repeat the question for me?
How involved was the Black church in gathering this information? Did you partner with any congregations and pastors in gathering this info?
Thank you. So yes, they were involved heavily. The AME Church, the 9th Episcopal District of the AME Church, as well as the Florida, Alabama District of the AME Zion Church, were very helpful in ensuring that we engaged their congregations. They invited us in to make presentations and also supported, put pamphlets out, sent out e-blasts on their Facebook and social media, because they felt like this was another level of engagement in their lay engagement. So they did a good job of engaging throughout the state of Alabama. And if I'm not mistaken, each one of them has a minimum of 100 churches or more throughout the state of Alabama.
Awesome, and it's great to hear because I'm AME, so all right.
Yeah, so Bishop Seawright and Bishop Crenshaw both supported the efforts of this project, and we attended just about all of the fall congregational gatherings that those denominations had throughout the state of Alabama. And we did workshops in each one of those meetings. Anyone else? Not hearing anything additional, I just wanted to close with saying that we wanted to remind people of what it means to engage people while they're in Black joy and not Black sorrow and disparity. That was one of the key items to this project. We were engaging our people when they were in spaces of where they found happiness, whether it was at a church service, whether it was at a football game, along a parade route, at a social gathering, that in the community, our people were willing to talk when they were not talking about tragedy. And so we're asking people to, it's just one of those things of moving away from the conversation that we don't want to talk. We don't want to talk during crisis. But if you give us an opportunity to speak when we are in our happy place, we have a lot that we can tell you and that we're willing to share with you. We also want to highlight the importance of the second congressional district and how we explain to our people when we lift our voices, we have the ability to not only change the community that's immediately around us, but to have ripple effects into other spaces and places to the point that the entire state is now looking at us to show how are we going to show up at the polls for the second congressional district, the 7th congressional district, and there's also some rumblings in the 1st congressional district about change because our people are being engaged and encouraged to lift their voices, and that voice, our echoes of our voices are being heard in neighboring states, Louisiana, Mississippi. And we can do this. And so our next steps are to continue to move forward. We're asking people to invest in Black 501c3, Black-led 501c3s in Alabama. We're asking people to support the work as we continue to organize our people, not just in cycle engagement to move them to the polls, but constant engagement 365 to move them to a better way of living. We have a lot of hills and valleys to cross, but we're packing our bags and moving out to cross those hills, to go through those valleys, and to do it together. We're here not just to say, oh, we have a nice report. We're here to make a calling card to our communities to pack up. This train is about to move, and we're getting ready to make our exodus out of sorrow and find our promised land of happiness, where we call Sweet Home Alabama really, really sweet. So we thank you for your time. We thank you for your interest. We will share the report with the organizing infrastructure of Alabama, and we hope that you share it with others and talk about the work that's going to change the world that is starting right now. And we will be sharing this report out to those who were surveyed so they can see what it means to lift their voice and have their voice taken serious. That they were not just talking to a couple of ladies that they met on the parade route that showed up at their church or that just showed up at some event that they were attending and didn't know we were there. And we're going to continue our conversations with funders throughout this country to ask them to invest in Alabama, invest in Black-led organizations. We're no longer in need of folks to hold our money so they can throw us crumbs. We know how to manage our dollars. That's the only way we've been able to live and flourish in this country. And we will be going back to the AME Zion Church and the AME Church and all the faith communities that are interested and ask them to help us lead this move of change here in Alabama. Thank you very much for your time. And we'll see you as we journey to happiness. Thank you.